There is a very specific type of person who comes from Silicon Valley. Not the genius, not the visionary, the networker. The guy who shows up in the right room at the right time, says exactly what the most powerful person in that room needs to hear, and then rides that relationship until it stops being useful. At which point, he finds another room, another powerful person, and does it all over again. Sam Altman has been doing this his entire career, and right now, he is doing it at the scale of hundreds of billions of dollars, with the future of artificial intelligence as the product he's selling, a product that, when you actually look under the hood, doesn't do what he says it does, costs more than he admits, and is burning through investor cash at a rate that would make WeWork blush. This is the story of how Sam Altman became the most dangerous con artist Silicon Valley has ever produced, and why almost nobody in power wants to say it out loud. Let's start at the beginning, because the pattern was there from day one. Sam Altman's first startup was a location-sharing app called Looped. It launched in 2005. It didn't do very well. It was eventually sold off for parts in 2012 for around $43 million, barely enough to return investor capital, and nowhere near the breakout success the hype had promised. But what Altman did brilliantly during that entire period was something his startup never achieved. He made himself indispensable to the most powerful people around him. The most important of those people was Paul Graham, founder of Y Combinator, the most prestigious startup accelerator in the world. In 2014, Graham made a decision that shocked the tech world. He handed the keys to Y Combinator to Sam Altman, a man in his 20s, whose only real credential was a startup that hadn't worked. Nobody could quite explain why. The honest answer, years later, from people inside that world? Paul Graham liked him. That was it. Not a track record, not a body of work, just a feeling. And here's the remarkable thing. When Ronan Farrow's New Yorker investigation dropped in April 2026, even Paul Graham was quoted saying that Altman had been lying to him. The man who gave Altman his first real platform. The man who handed him the keys to one of the most powerful startup networks on Earth. Even he eventually said the word. Lying. This is the first lesson of Sam Altman. He doesn't need to be good at the thing. He needs to be good at making the powerful person in the room feel like they've discovered something extraordinary. It's a talent, just not the one he's being given credit for. Fast forward to 2015. Altman co-founds OpenAI alongside Elon Musk, Greg Brockman, and others. The stated mission is almost comically noble. Build artificial general intelligence for the benefit of all of humanity. A nonprofit, no profit motive, just saving the world. Here's what they actually had at the time. GPT-2, a model that could generate text. That was it. And yet Altman and Brockman were already, according to internal accounts, discussing how to play world powers against each other, selling AI to governments, militaries, anyone who would listen before they had anything remotely worth selling. These guys have always been fantasists. The gap between what OpenAI claimed it could do and what it actually could do has been there since the very beginning. The only thing that changed over time was the number of zeros on the funding rounds. Now let's talk about the board firing, because this is where the mask came completely off. In November 2023, OpenAI's board fired Sam Altman, not over a performance issue, not over a failed product launch. They fired him because OpenAI's former chief scientist, Ilya Sutskever, had compiled roughly 70 pages of internal Slack messages and documents, a dossier, whose very first heading read, "Sam exhibits a consistent pattern of," and the first item on that list was a single word, lying. Not miscommunication, not over-optimism, lying. From the man who helped build OpenAI from nothing. That's what the board thought of their CEO. Within 5 days, Altman was back in the seat. How? He set up a war room at his San Francisco home, hired a crisis communications advisor, ran an aggressive social media campaign, and leveraged investors who conditioned their continued funding on his reinstatement. Then, most critically, he organized a mass employee walkout threat, reportedly sending private pressure to workers who were hesitant to sign on. He didn't argue his innocence. He just applied enough pressure that the board had no practical choice. And then he replaced every board member who had voted against him with allies. That's not how an innocent man responds. That's how a fixer responds. And Silicon Valley watched all of it happen in real time, shrugged, and handed him another $40 billion. In April 2026, Ronan Farrow and Andrew Marantz published a New Yorker investigation built on more than 100 interviews and over 200 pages of internal documents. It described Altman as a pathological liar. It documented how the superalignment safety team promised 20% of OpenAI's compute to work on existential AI risks, was actually given 1 to 2%. It described safety teams being dissolved not once, not twice, but 3 times in 2 years. And it quoted an anonymous board member saying, the way OpenAI was financially levered up was, in their word, scary. Think about that. A board member, someone with a fiduciary duty to the company, said that in private. Board members don't say things like that unless they mean it. That is a person watching a financial structure and thinking, this doesn't add up. How does it not add up? Let's go to the numbers. OpenAI posted a $13.5 billion net loss in just the first half of 2025. For the full year 2026, internal projections show losses of $14 billion against roughly $13 billion in revenue, meaning they spend more than they make, by a margin, even at their current scale. By 2027, their annual burn rate is projected to hit $57 billion. $57 billion in a single year. Before they earn back a single dollar of profit, HSBC analysts estimate OpenAI faces a $207 billion funding shortfall before it can sustain itself. Their own internal projections don't show profitability until sometime in the 2030s, and that's their projection, which means the real number is probably worse. Now, how does Altman explain this to investors? He uses a magic word, training. He frames the company's single largest, never-ending, always growing expense, training these models, as a capital expenditure, a one-time investment, something that will eventually stop. It won't stop. Training covers everything from fixing model drift to developing new models entirely. It is a permanent compounding operating cost dressed up in CapEx language to make the margins look less catastrophic than they are. The reported profit figures are non-GAAP, meaning they exclude training costs from the calculation entirely. It is the largest single accounting deception inside the AI bubble, and it has been sitting in plain sight in every earnings presentation, every investor deck, every breathless press release for years. The financial press read it, nodded, and moved on. So why is Altman pushing so hard for an IPO? OpenAI's own CFO, Sarah Friar, privately told colleagues the company was not ready to go public in 2026 and wasn't confident the revenue growth could justify the compute spend, or that they could even pay their obligations. She was subsequently removed from key financial meetings and no longer reports directly to Altman. The answer to why Altman wants the IPO anyway is simple: exit liquidity. Altman himself holds no OpenAI stock, but the investors and early insiders who do are sitting on paper valuations worth hundreds of billions, and they need a public market to actually cash out. The IPO isn't about building a sustainable business. It's about creating a window for the people who got in early to get their money out before the financial reality catches up with the narrative. When that S1, the public filing required to go public, finally comes out, the world is going to see the actual guts of this company for the first time, the true burn rate, the real margins, the actual trajectory. And it is going to be a very different picture than the one Sam Altman has been painting in interviews for the last decade. Every journalist who ever called him a visionary is going to have to decide whether they read that filing or quietly archive their old pieces. Here's the deepest part of the con. And it's the part that makes Altman genuinely dangerous, not just another Silicon Valley grifter. Large language models are the perfect product to sell to people who will never use them. They sound terrifying. They sound omnipotent. They generate text that looks like human intelligence from the outside, especially if you've never actually pushed one hard on a real task. And the most powerful people in the world, the investors, the senators, the heads of state, the Fortune 500 CEOs, most of them never actually use these tools. They read the press coverage, they see the demos, they hear Sam Altman say, on a stage in a tailored jacket, "We may be building one of the most transformative and potentially dangerous technologies in human history." And they think, this man must know something we don't. He doesn't. Or rather, he knows one thing. He knows that people will always extrapolate beyond what these models can currently do. He knows that fear is a funding mechanism. He knows that if you say the word existential enough times in enough Senate hearings, the money keeps flowing and the questions stop coming. He knows that if he can keep enough journalists repeating theoretical capabilities as if they were current ones, he can raise another round and then another, and keep the machine running long enough that by the time anyone looks too closely at the books, he'll have already moved on to the next network, the next room, the next powerful person. Sam Altman didn't build the most valuable AI company in the world because he understood artificial intelligence. He built it because he understood people. He understood greed. He understood how to make billionaires feel like they were betting on the future. He understood that in a world desperate for a technological messiah, all you have to do is walk confidently into the room. The con isn't the AI. The con is the man who convinced the world the AI was magic. If you found this video valuable, like, subscribe, and share it. The more people understand what's actually happening inside the AI industry, the harder it becomes to keep the narrative running.